It was one of those gray, silent mornings when the world feels like it's holding its breath. The kind of morning where even the coffee shop chatter sounds muffled, like everyone's lost in their own little storms. That's when I saw her again, Maya. She was sitting in her usual spot near the window, the same seat she'd taken every day for the past few weeks. A small latte, half drunk. Headphones in. Eyes staring at nothing. She always smiled when I waved before my shift started. But that morning, her smile didn't reach her eyes. I don't know why I noticed. Maybe it was the way she fiddled with her sleeve, or how she stared too long at the same spot on the wall, like she was afraid to blink. When I brought her the refill she didn't ask for, she looked up and said softly, "I'm fine." But her eyes begged me to say something. I hesitated. I mean, who was I to intrude? We were just strangers who shared the same coffee shop air every morning. But something in her silence felt heavier than anything caffeine could fix. So I sat down across from her and said the first thing that came to mind. "You know, you don't look fine." She blinked, surprised. Then a single tear slipped down her cheek. And suddenly, the floodgates opened. Maya told me about how her mother had passed away 3 weeks ago. How she'd flown back home for the funeral, only to return to an empty apartment that didn't feel like home anymore. How she hadn't spoken to anyone since. She said she came to the cafe because the sound of people helped her forget how quiet her world had become. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just listened. Really listened. She talked for almost an hour. Her words were shaky at first, then steady, like she'd been waiting for someone to just hear her. When she finally stopped, she laughed through her tears. "You must think I'm crazy, unloading on a stranger." I smiled. "No. I think you're human." The next morning, she came back, same table, same coffee. But this time, there was color in her face. She smiled when she saw me, and it wasn't the polite kind. It was real. Over the next few weeks, she'd bring her sketchbook. Sometimes she'd draw quietly while I worked, sometimes she'd show me what she'd made. She started talking about going back to work, reconnecting with her sister, visiting her mom's favorite park. And every time she said, "I'm fine," she meant it a little more. Months passed. The seasons changed. Then one day, I walked in and found a small envelope on her table. Inside was a sketch of me. Standing behind the counter, handing her a coffee, smiling like I always did. At the bottom, she'd written, "You didn't save me. You just saw me." And that was enough. I still keep that drawing pinned to my wall. It reminds me that sometimes, kindness doesn't mean fixing someone's world, it means showing up when it's falling apart. That a simple, "Are you really fine?" can be the bridge between silence and healing. And that in a world full of noise, sometimes the quietest acts of compassion echo the loudest. Never underestimate the power of noticing someone. Because sometimes, seeing them is the most human thing we can do.